हमारे अगले सेशन का समय हो चुका है and I'm still somewhere lost in the words. वो भाव जो हैं यही कहीं मंडला रहे हैं तो इतने जल्दी तो जाएंगे नहीं. But right now we are going to talk about marketing. If writing is an art, so is marketing. And in this era of globalization, the kind of research one does to write, I think marketing also needs similar amount of research. So let's know some new tricks because the theme this time is how to market your products and find new takers. Deliberating on the topic are Radharani Mitra, who is the mastermind for several national campaigns, author Ravinder Singh, and publisher VK Karthika. May I now request Madam Mitra, Mr. Singh, and Madam Karthika to please join us on stage. I'll request everyone to please settle down. We are starting this very special and very interesting session on how to market your products and find new takers. Over to the chairman.
It's very hard to pull something off after this riveting act of Piyush Mishra and Divya in conversation with him. We'll try our best. So with me I have VK Karthika, very well-known publisher, and Ravinder Singh, who has sold millions and millions of books writing on romance. And here I am sitting between these two people. I've been writing stories for nearly 3 decades now, but my stories have been written to sell brands. And in the last 9 years, I've been writing stories to change behavior, change attitudes. I've been writing stories when the Ebola outbreak happened in Western Africa. I wrote stories to normalize condoms in India. At the moment, I'm writing a story on adolescence. I'm in the middle of producing a TV drama, which is a whodunit 3 teen detectives called Adha Full. And I am in conversation with Ravinder and Karthika to find out the role of selling, the role of marketing in the world of literature, in the world of in the world of books. So we'll try and keep it very tight because we are conscious that we have to keep to time. So my first question is actually something that I'd like to ask both of you, Karthika and Ravinder, which is that
can I please ask everyone to just keep quiet and listen to this session? Only that will make sense. Everyone,
yeah.
Whatever we are doing, we can just postpone it.
Yeah.
Or if you still want to talk, you may just step out. Thank you so much.
Okay. So the question I want to ask the two of you is, what is a product? Do you think a book is a product? Would you like to go first, Karthika?
I'd like to say it's not a product, but I don't think there's any denying the fact that these days, anything you write, eventually you have to sell it if you have to make the impact you want. Any writer wants readers, you've got to find readers. How do you find readers except by marketing that book? And I think the moment you put the word marketing with something, it becomes a product. The moment you start planning a way to get something from point A to Z, you are planning a process, and the process means there's a product involved. So there's no getting away from the fact. What the repercussions are, what the implications are to making a book a product is something else.
So when there's a price put on the back cover,
yeah,
you have to do something to justify that price, right? A lot of all this may be anathema to people like us who love books, all of you who are here because we love reading. So anything else that you would like to say?
No, I was just thinking that this session that came before us, which was, this is a literary festival. We have a lot of literary festivals in this country, and literature is becoming redefined as we speak. The moment that the very concept of literature and the book are being changed, everything associated with it, from the early ideas of how a book is written to what goes into it, to the solitude of it from the beginning to the end, everything has become dramatically different. And I don't think anyone embodies it as well at this point as Ravinder does in the way things have changed. He embodies that change. So maybe he should talk about that aspect of
so
it.
Ravinder, is a book a product?
It depends on the perspective with which I'm looking at the book and the stage that the book is at. If I'm writing my new novel right now, I'm not writing a product. I'm not creating. I just can't look at the story as a product as on date. But the moment the book reaches a bookshelf, it has got an MRP, maybe some discount put by online retailer. It is a product. In spite of the fact that I'm an author of this particular story, I look at it as a product. I'm done playing with characters. I have given birth to them. I have nurtured them. And at one point in time, I give it to my readers. And then from there on, they hold the hands of these characters. But the moment I walk into a bookstore, I see it as nothing but a retail store which has put so many products around me. Each one of them has a label and an MRP to it, and we withdraw it and then go out there. So different perspectives as an author, as an entrepreneur. So we are in the startup era. Each book of mine, I go beyond looking at it as product, and I look at a book as a venture. I see myself as an entrepreneur who's creating this venture. Tomorrow I will be talking about the marketing strategy, how are we going to position it, what sort of campaigns we are going to draw for this particular book. And I see my publishers as a private equity.
Okay. That's actually a very, very good segue into my next question, which is for you, Karthika, which is that, in the last 10 years, we have seen our lives changing in more ways than one. I mean, 10 years ago, we led very, very different lives, no matter how young or old you are at this point in time. So what do you think has changed in the world of publishing in the last 10 years? Has it been a person? Is it a phenomena? Is it digitization? Is it the growth of social media or the way marketing has evolved? What is it as a publisher of repute that you have felt has changed remarkably? In fact, what has been the paradigm shift in your business in the last 10 years?
Can I ask the audience a question? How many of you read books? Any sort of book, not academic work, but for entertainment. Right. I assume you're talking about the physical book, right? How many of you download and read books on Kindle or any other device? Okay, that's not bad. That's a decent percentage. Because to my mind, that is really the fundamental difference between publishing 10 years ago and 10 years, past, which is that there is no longer the comfort or the surety of knowing that you are doing one thing, which is printing and publishing a book and trying to get it to your readers. I think now what we're looking at is multiple platforms, multiple kinds of readers scattered across the country who all magically have access to books now in a way they didn't have 10 years ago. So if 10 years ago we were publishing books, we were thinking, how do we make sure that all the bookstores in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Hyderabad, Pune, whatever, those few places where readership is very high, where there are good bookstores, how do we cater to this audience of books and how do we get the books there? Now we have to think, how does everyone in this country read? How do we get books produced that are of interest everywhere? Because anyone sitting anywhere can now order a copy online and hope to get it delivered to them. They don't anymore need to have great bookshops near them. So there's a liberating concept there of democratization of reading itself, which was completely unfamiliar to us 10 years ago. But having said that, there's also the very real fact that of all the people here who lifted their hands when we said, are you reading physical books? The percentage of people who are reading digitally is also much less. I think people spend time on their devices, either on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever else it is, far more than they spend time reading a full book. So we in a sense, we're in limbo. We're preparing for something that may never come or may come to us, say, 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line. But we have to open up our minds a lot more to platform agnostic work and content rather than to just the one thing of publishing for physical readership.
That's a very interesting way of putting it because we use it a lot in the business I'm in, which is, developing communication that will change people's lives. So we talk about media agnostic ideas. So, can I think of an idea that can be used on television, that can be used for mobile, that can be used for community mobilization. So agnostic is really the order of the day. And in marketing, since this is a marketing session, one keeps hearing of a term which is 360 degrees. So again, my next question to you, Karthika, is when you are done with packaging a book, you have to start thinking of packaging the launch, right? And so in your opinion, and more importantly, in your experience, how important is the marketing after a book physically comes out? What role does it play in the success of the book? The answer is a bit of a no-brainer, but I would like to provoke you into saying something.
I'm going to put Ravinder on the spot here because, again, the difference between publishing then and now is that the attention and the entire focus of marketing has actually shifted from this book, the product, to this author, the product. Because essentially, I think if you're here listening to him talk, you're here because it's him, not another writer, right? There is a certain requirement almost for a writer to stand up there and be seen and to be heard as much as to be read, which is a very, very big difference from our point of view from what used to be. I don't think people cared who the writer was. They read the book. I don't think they cared who published the book. They don't even look at the logo of the publisher. But gradually, all of these things are becoming important, and the author is the central difference. He has to perform, he has to sell, he has to do everything that it takes to say, look, I'm a writer, you need to read. And that's what the publisher's job is now, to support that run for the writer.
So are you a brand, Ravinder, or are your books the brands?
It's very disturbing to do this when there are just conversations happening in the audience constantly. It's like a buzz going on. Thank you.
Yeah. So would you...
I'm not carrying my book, but I can start a conversation out there. Unfortunately, the session is on marketing and product. I'm not talking about romance here.
No, we can innovate. That's not a problem. You can ask for a book to be brought there, copies of your books lying outside on the table. But that's a good idea. We can think about it if we have time. But I want an answer to my question.
That's the problem of coming after Piyush Mishra. The expectations go this way out there. I would love to consider myself, see myself secretly. I would want to become a brand out there. My publishers tell me that this is a reality and that's going to happen. But I do believe that end of the day, the story should have a spine. It should have a backbone. The content should have the power. This is what I learned in my B school. Two things that take a corporate to a different league altogether is innovation and marketing. Now, when I look at book, innovation for the book is the content in itself. The story has to connect. People have to see themselves in the story at that point in time. My readers tell me, you know what, how did you happen to read my mind? And I ask them, what exactly do you mean? They tell me, I felt as if I was reading about myself on every page that I folded. It was me, and I was getting to look at myself from a very different perspective. This may not hold in any story. For example, if we happen to write a fantasy, a sci-fi, a love story happening between two astronauts on a different planet altogether. Now, the person cannot relate, but he or she will definitely relate to the emotions that they are churning upon. I would love to consider myself as a brand. I don't know if I am or not, but that does not mean that I can ride that brand wave and write books that aren't well to read. One book may do well, with the second the downfall will begin, And as an author, I have to reinvent myself with every story. End of the day, I cannot keep writing about love story, romance. I have to bring some interesting plots out there. Now, I'm not the same person who happened to write I Too Had a Love Story 8 years back when I was 25 years young, a broken heart, amateur author who had not read a single book and chose to write one. Today, 8 years later, I am writing in my book about the concept of extramarital affair, the possibility of open marriage, because I see the world around me changing. I see new relationship issues coming together. And I really want to take charm in talking about that in the same emotional fundamental.
So, in advertising and marketing, the phrase target audience is very, very important. It's key, in fact, because when you want to sell something, you really have to keep audience at the heart of everything you do. So, Ravinder, you write about romance. You've got a very, very young readership. You said to me that basically people who are reading you are between, say, 18 to 24, but they could also be, 15, 16 years old. So what do you do to know your audiences better?
I do a lot of book tours. I love the idea of meeting my readers and talking to them about what exactly that they love. When they tweet me, oh, I love this book, I tweet them back. What exactly in the book did you love? Because I really want to, मुझे नब्ज पकड़नी है उसकी कि आपको क्या अच्छा लगा है. And also tell me आपको क्या अच्छा नहीं लगा है. I really want to do that. I do a lot of research and it all boils down to the marketing. So for example, if I have a Facebook page which has got certain number of likes and people talk about it, I go back and research the statistics of the Facebook page. What is the demography of the reader? What exactly do they love apart from reading? Where exactly are they living? Which pockets of this country, so that I can plan my book tour in these particular areas. So I focus on the entire stats that these social media pages give it to me. I talk to them. I make sure I talk to 20 new readers every day. I put in so much effort. Not because I want my books to sell, but because I genuinely take interest in it. If you do not take interest in reaching out to your readers, it's very difficult to sustain this process. That's my problem.
So talking about research, Karthika, again, you belong to a business establishment. You've been a very, very senior person in publishing. I'd like you to talk to the audience about what kind of research do publishing houses do. So for example, say if a Unilever is bringing out a new product or a brand, or extending a category, bringing out a new kind of shampoo. I'm sorry, I'm not comparing books and shampoos. I'm asking, in fact, a very academic question. They would do a whole lot of, formative research. They would look at audience insights. So very, very interesting to know what is it that you do to find out more about the people you're selling to.
There is a big problem in our industry, which is the lack of data. For years, we've gone by what we call instinct and experience because there's no figures to fill in anything. There's nobody doing surveys. There's no one actually going out to find out what people read, how they read, none of that. Of late, we've got the book scan here, Nielsen book scan. I don't know if it appears in the editions here, but in Hindustan Times on a Saturday morning, you have a top 10, which shows a listing of the top 10 in fiction, top 10 in non-fiction. My dilemma is that this kind of information that is therefore now available to us is actually creating a problem. I wish we didn't have this information, because the moment you have an information which says, okay, these are the books that are selling, everybody just wants to publish the books that are selling. Nobody wants to take a risk. Nobody wants to say, okay, this book sold so many copies, but if we did something else entirely, it might actually sell more. Every salesperson I know wants to play it safe. Every salesperson says, look at the figures before we buy a book. Look at the figures before you acquire a writer, because their sales history is going to tell you what the future holds. My favorite story to that is Michael Ondaatje's story. When he was being published by Knopf in the US, apparently his books would sell like 2,000 copies, 3,000 copies, and the sales guys were getting really frustrated. And Sunny Mehta, who's the publisher at Knopf, used to be like, wait, I'm sure we're going to sell more. And then he wrote The English Patient. And The English Patient just went on and on and on and sold millions of copies. And suddenly his sales history changed. Now you can buy and sell anything of his. So figures can be dangerous. Figures can be reductive. And figures and data and research in creative spaces, I think, can be more of a deterrent sometimes to true creativity than actually supporting work.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I agree with you. I was reading on social media yesterday that Shekhar Kapoor said that my drug is my instinct. And I think that when you give into big data and you forget your instinct, then you just fall prey to, being very risk averse, not being adventurous. And I think, what is happening on Indian television today is indicative of that, because once a kind of show becomes a success, then nobody makes anything else.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So the other thing about publishing that I wanted to ask, and this time, Ravinder, I would like you to answer, because you're a young author. Karthika talked about what has changed in the last 10 years. What do you think is going to change significantly in the next 5 years? You talked about being an author come entrepreneur. So is there something in there? Is it something you see happening more and more of? Is there a more distinct line that's going to be drawn between popular authors and high literature? What role is the mobile phone or reading on tablets going to play in reading?
So I can't predict future, but I definitely want to see two things happening in future.
You want to see, or you think you will see?
I want to see. I don't know will I see it or not, but I will definitely push for it. That's what my point is. One, we live in a very hypocritical world in which we celebrate hundreds of literature festivals in this country in a year, but we don't even have handful of full-time authors in this country who can make a good living out of that profession. Yesterday I was talking to a few colleagues here at the dinner, and somebody asked me this question. So what do you do? I say, I write. The second question that followed, what? That's fine, but what do you do? My response was the same. I write. The whole understanding is that writing is not that first profession to make you a good living. I really wish that if this changes, there's no point wherein we talk about these many numbers of books, end of the day, but out there are only a dozen authors who we know, who the world is willing to keep their books out there. I personally would want to push as many authors as possible. This is one reason why I started Black Ink, just for the debut authors, because I really want even that rat race of Nielsen Bookscan race is dominated by only 6-10 names for past 7-8 years. Why there are no new entries out there? Second, what I want to see changing in this country is the television. We have hundreds of channels on Indian television. We have got people from different demography, from chefs to cricketers to Bollywood to lyricists to musicians, all on television. We have got these reviews happening for films, for gadgets, for automobiles. We do not have one show that talks about books, the new releases of books and their review.
No,
that should change out there.
We did actually, and because nobody wanted to watch it, they had to close it down. The TRPs were zero.
We need to build that persona. I remember when I was rejected by almost every publishing house of this country that I knew about, they said, "Is love story mein dam nahi hai, isko hatao." We are keen to publish only literary work out there. Bunch of authors came and changed the entire diaspora out there. The same publishers who rejected, who did not believe that a particular story will do good, now want all these authors to sign contracts with them. Because these authors believe that this can be done. On the same ground, I believe that so much can be done. We just need to make reading as that cool thing, that sexy thing. We haven't done that so far.
But
you're,
I think
you're doing a good job of getting there.
Yeah. So Karthika, before we wind up and leave some time for some questions and answers, what is the biggest risk you've taken as a publisher, and did that risk pay off?
It depends on what you mean by risk. Do you mean money?
No. So, if you thought you were taking a risk, did it pay off in terms of both critical acclaim and, of course, for your publishing company, the house that you belong to at that point in time?
Well, I think the single biggest risk we took in terms of an advance was certainly Arvind Adiga and The White Tiger, because that was an unknown writer. It was a first-time writer. I don't know what madness drove us at that point to say, we really want this book and we're going to make it happen. And we fully expected to lose money on it. We fully expected to be able to do so much, but not perhaps more. And suddenly the Booker Prize came along and just swept it all into success. So it was a stroke of great luck, I suppose, as much as anything else. But yeah, that was probably the single biggest risk, if you want to call it that.
Just one last thing. As both of you said, there are lit fests happening in the country, and I think the number of lit fests has run into 3 digits. Am I right in saying that?
That's what he was saying today.
Yeah.
That's what you were
Because
saying.
every university and colleges have started their own lit fest in parallel to the techno and the youth
Yes,
fest.
and then there are some lit fests that are giving book awards.
Yes.
So what does each one of you think about that? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Should it be changed or not changed? And then we open the house up for Q&A.
The awards at the festival?
Yeah.
Of course, there should be as many awards as possible. My only thing that what should change is the only idea to nominate literary fiction in the fiction category and not the popular fiction. That should change. There should either be a nomination or just a recognition that these number of books are doing really well in this country. You may not need award, but at least that recognition should come. Because the understanding is that literary fiction is here and the popular one is down market.
So
That's
like
the problem.
Like a critic's choice and a popular choice kind of thing.
Anything, but recognize in some way. Do not give award at least, but talk about the 5 big books. How do we talk about in the movie industry? This 300 crore movie, 200. It's all a creative work, you know. There's many views on a particular trailer. In the same field, so many litfests can talk about this great number of quantities.
But don't you think the fact that you as a moving force in today's, today's sort of popular fiction, you're here sitting on this stage as you are in every other lit fest, isn't that recognition enough?
It is, but when you define a hierarchy that we are going to award and reward, I'm not talking about the monetary or I just want that recognition. Why do you want to leave a particular genre out when it has created so much of revenue for its publisher and the author himself or herself?
So are you in agreement, Karthika? Are we leaving the genre out?
I think most literary prizes simply say fiction and non-fiction. They don't categorize within that, in which case then we would have to say crime fiction, the best work, fantasy, the best work, commercial, literary. I think these categories are actually invented by publishers and marketers for convenience, so that you can target the selling of the book better. I'm not sure that you would say P.D. James, when she writes a crime novel, for me it's literary as well as commercial, all of it mixed into one. If you read Nesbo, it's great crime writing, but it's also great literature, to my mind. There's not that kind of difference between the two. So I wish what is ideal for a publisher is a really well-told story or a novel, which is also beautifully written, and you just have the best of both worlds. A God of Small Things is commercial and literary at the same time. So are 100,000 other books. So I don't particularly think award categories being defined in that way will make any substantial difference.
Sure, I think it goes a lot to the critics who are sitting, the entire jury who decides for these 5 books or 6 books. Perhaps we need to change their school or influence some different people who also represent or who also have a knack of other sort of books rather than sticking to a particular genre. Now, I don't want a separate award for a crime thriller or something. Perhaps maybe we can call this as a retail award, coming from the retailers
Which
on
is
the
what
basis of
Crossword
data.
does. Crossword has that
Yeah,
commercial price.
exactly.
Yeah.
So how many
Yes.
people in the room are in favor of having separate awards for so-called literary books and popular books? Let's have a show. No, so I don't know which one is what. Literary books, hands up. And popular books?
You know, the problem there, if I may, I'm just thinking this through, is that popular books go by the category, by the major criterion of saleability. If you've sold more, then you are the most popular and therefore the book that wins the award. But I think it's far more nuanced when you're giving it to a book for other reasons than of saleability. You might give a prize to something that sold 1,000 copies, but it's just a book that does
I don't deny
wonderful
that.
things.
I don't deny
I'm not
that.
sure that
Sure.
just popular is enough.
No. It's not about that. The whole perception is that, oh, this is a popular book. Why should we even nominate it in an award? We
But
have
why
already
are
gained
awards
that
so
out there.
important, Ravinder? Why?
It's not. I'm saying if
What
a
you
lit-
have is what every award-winning author wants, which is sales and revenue.
and I want the other. The
Yes,
grass is always
exactly.
greener at the other end.
The grass is always green on the other side. That's the moral of the story. So with that, can we just open the house up for some Q&A? Yes, you over there. It-
Fair enough, yeah.
Fair enough, yeah. That's an insightful observation.
The author will only make money when the books are sold and people are aware of the books as well. Can't even hear you.
Yeah, what he's saying is that Chetan Bhagat is therefore more of a brand than any one of his books. Right? That's what you're saying. Any other questions?
Good evening to all the panelists there. My question is that as a publisher, what is more difficult? Like, how difficult or challenging is it to publish a debut writer? And how difficult is it to push the book into the market to increase the sales?
It's the hardest thing because so much of this rides on your understanding that this writer, I'm talking about you as a reader, you walk into a bookstore and you are likely to pick something that you've heard about. So you might just go for the safer book. Whereas for that same reason, you will ignore someone you've never heard of, never read anything by. You're not going to risk too much. That risk averseness of the reader is what becomes the biggest problem for the publisher. So we do have a great deal of difficulty marketing those books. But our belief is that unless you keep getting debut writers out there, you're never going to find anything new to read. You're only going to stay safe as a reader and as a publisher. So you take the risk and you hope that with some effective marketing and some good reviewing, you'll at least get the book to be talked about. And then the battle is half won.
And of course, then there's word of mouth, right? Which is
Yes,
a
absolutely.
huge marketing force. Any other questions?
Hello. Sir, do you think someone could be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly?
It depends on the kind of book that you are writing. You may not need emotions when you're writing a non-fiction or a yoga book. Thank you.
Ma'am, I have a question. This question is for both of you because we are writer and publisher as well. So what, according to you as a writer, is the actual success of a book? The number of copies it is sold or the number of appraisals that you get on social media, say Twitter or Facebook, whatever?
All of it, but predominantly what defines the success is the word of the mouth that eventually leads the entire journey. And if that is where you are able to reach, or that's where the marketing is able to push the book, and beyond that, you leave the book, it will sail on its own. I find it successful when people continue to talk about the characters of my book, or they would want to tag their friends and point it out, have you read this book? Of course, I'm perfectly fine if all the people in this room may not want to buy my book a particular day, but borrow it and read it. I take more charm. I still will feel that it's more successful than perhaps selling yet another copy. I really want the end result is to push the story to these many people. If they like it, they will definitely go ahead and tomorrow buy it or recommend it. And by recommending it, it may create a wider market for me. Thank you.
Any other questions? We have time for 2 more questions, I think.
If we look at the case of a young writer who has just started writing, and supposing that the book is printed and the publishing and all is done, then like what next? How do we promote the book after that? Because mostly if the writer is a teenager, and then why will anyone bother to read a new writer's novel? Like, so how do we promote that book?
I think you kind of answered that, Karthika, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you are a person who wants to get out there and promote your book, these days I think social media is the best and most, less expensive way to do this. You can get word out, you can build communities around it, you can blog about it, you can buy space on it to promote it. So that would probably be the biggest way, but the thing you have to try and capture is that word of mouth. If people will start talking about it and liking it, then it'll go further. But it is a very difficult thing to do. I have no doubt about that.
Ma'am, the reason why I asked this is I've actually written a book. It's a small book, and I would like to present it to you.
I shall happily accept it and read it, but that's not the right way to market your book. I'm the wrong person.
Yes, the gentleman in front of you.
When I look at the market, I find 3 components. One is the writer, the other is the publisher, the third is the bookseller. Today, the writer himself becomes the publisher, he himself becomes the bookseller. And the publisher, sometimes they sell their own books, they market their own material. Booksellers as a category, I don't know what is their position now in the country. At one time, they are flourishing, but I don't know whether they are there or not. But one thing is clear, at least about regional language publishing, is books are not available in the market. It is not true that people are not reading or people do not want to read. Just simple that books are not available in the market. Therefore, one of the things that we have suggested that the government should help subsidize and create booksellers in different parts of the state. The same thing I would also suggest about publishing of the English books. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is one of the European publishers, as my publisher, they price the book so high that if they sell 300 copies, then all their cost is retrieved. They are no longer interested whether the book sells or not.
But that's precisely the reason, I mean, if that's what your question is then, about to comment on that, that's precisely the reason, your second point, why I think the government should not step in. Anywhere the government steps in, the organic process of buying and selling and supply and demand is destroyed immediately. In the Hindi market, for instance, the government has for long been buying 500 copies of every book that is published by a publisher. And that idea of 500 copies being bought meant they only printed 500 copies, retrieved all the costs, and then did not pay any attention to the book. So you killed that market. You don't want to do that again. Forget the government. This is a place where you need private enterprise to function effectively to get the books to where they need to be. This is my opinion.
I second that.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make a point here. I think that if you're talking about books as products, again, contextualizing the business of reading against the backdrop of this particular panel discussion, we all are aware, we all have to be aware that there's a market force at play, right?
That's right.
Then there are very different books being written, and readers are evolving. Younger and younger readers are coming into the market. So there are there is actually not just one factor that can determine how books can be published and sold and who is to do what. There are many, many factors. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Can I just
Yes,
close
yes.
one little thing? Because when she were talking about how a book is seen to be successful, what makes a book successful? I just wanted to say that Ravinder's point of view of how the numbers work, etc., is one. From the publisher's point of view, I think it depends on the expectations you have from a book. You might take on a book for the reason that it's a brilliantly written book that might just win you a few awards or do a few thousand copies, but maybe contribute very greatly to a debate around a subject, for instance, among people who are engaged in that. Or you might take on a book because you think it's a great narrative for a particular kind of audience, or say children to read something or understand something. So it depends on what you set up as an expectation for that title. And if it meets that expectation, in some cases it will be numbers, in other cases it may be other factors, then you would say this book is successful. I don't think there's a rule across all segments and genres.
There is not one criteria
Yeah.
for success. So I think we are done. Yes. We don't have time for... There was the context of the Indian national movement. So it was a very, very different context.
And do you know, when Gandhi first published Hind Swaraj, I think it was, he first bought back 1,000 copies, or rather whoever was involved with it. I read somewhere that they actually bought those copies to give out. And I thought, well, after all these years, that's exactly what writers now have to do as well.
He was streets ahead in everything.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, panelists, for this extremely informative session. May I now request Mr. Chawla to please do the honor of presenting small tokens of appreciation to Madam Mitra, Madam Karthika, and Mr. Singh. I think the details discussed in this session are going to be very, very helpful to the young authors, writers, because they'll know which areas to focus on and what research they should do before writing, so that they can market their products and find new takers. Thank you once again. And as millions of viewers watch this Lit Fest on YouTube as well, I hope there is some production house who will pick the hint, and there will be some TV show exclusively on literature and books and new releases. That will be such a wonderful thing.